And all the world is Graham Archer. You know, last week we were talking to you about Channel 7 coming up with this idea of making the news, putting in ingredients into the news on the basis that, well, you know, there could be a lifestyle thing, there could be a comedy thing, there could be a virtually anything your imagination could take you, even astrology, maybe, astrological forecast. Anyway, I was talking to Graham Archer about it during the week, and he, long-time investigative journalist and news director. I was keen to have a talk to you about this new approach. Not that I suppose it's new. People have tried it to various degrees before, of putting different ingredients in the news.
Yes.
Channel 7 want to put a comedy piece in on a Friday, and they want astrological segment. Is this a good idea? Is this growing the genre or what?
Well, as you say, these experiments are not new. And look, I don't think you can ever criticise anyone for thing to see if it works. So from that point of view, sure, you know, try some new things and see how they go. I watched the first segment of the comedy section, which I thought was because it concentrated on Biden's deficiencies in the debate. And I thought they could have started with something a little more relevant locally.
Yeah, that was last Friday, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was really a rehash of.
Yep.
And while it was...
Was it funny?
Well, it wasn't funny because we knew all of the punchlines.
Well, I don't know much about this fellow, Mark something.
Well, he's quite clever, and he's a satirist, and he's on the ABC.
Yes. And
what he did was, you know, quite clever, but it was just over old ground, I thought, rather than creating something new.
So the idea is good, but you've got to be a little more selective with the script or the story. You know, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Channel 7 or perhaps the ABC, who used John Clark and Brian Dore to great effect. They were...
Well, that was actually Channel 9. It was a current affair, and they were there when I worked for a current affair. John Clark was a
genius.
He was a rare breed, and he was truly a genius. And one of the funniest things that I received when I was at Channel 9 was a promotional brochure that unfolded to half a dozen, perhaps a dozen panels, and they were all the identical faces of John Clark, just John Clark repeated over and over again. But underneath was written Maggie Thatcher, Edward Heath, because he played the characters but just played them as him.
Yeah.
And it was very, very clever and very funny.
Yes.
But you see, that's current affairs, which has a bit more flexibility. It's a bit more of an editorial, whereas news we expect to be objective.
Yeah.
You know, just tell us the facts, don't embroider them, move on.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that's happened is the 1 hour newses, which have now, certainly at Channel 7, the position of Tonight, are looking for material. And given that they've laid claim to that extra half hour, I think they think that perhaps just the straight presentation is a bit dull.
Yeah.
But Graham, aren't we running the danger of following in the footsteps of the US and creating news to be more an entertainment segment rather than something that should be, you know, special and direct and informative and to the point?
Look, I agree, and I think that's a bigger question about news generally. I mean, one segment once a week for 3 minutes is probably not a wholesale change in news as told, and probably won't make any difference to their race.
In other words?
Well, it's not a turn-off, but people wouldn't hang around till, 6:57 Friday night just to watch it.
What about the idea of an astrological forecast segment?
Yeah, well, I think that's just, that's just mumbo jumbo.
Yes.
Now, I, with all due respects to people who follow their star signs, I mean, as an item in the news, it's a kind of, a contradiction.
Yeah,
in the broadest terms. But what I expected to see a gypsy with a veil
a crystal ball.
And a crystal ball.
Yeah.
And I was looking forward to that.
Well, that might work.
Yeah. Well, it worked for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But it was just a series of graphics covering each star sign with one or two sentences.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, nobody read it. It just, the viewer had to star sign and read what was going to happen to them. So it was a bit of an anticlimax.
Will those segments stay, or do you think Mark Mooney will change his mind? He's the news director currently.
Yeah, well, it's not Mark Mooney's call. National News Director, Current Affairs, Head of News and Current Affairs, a guy called Andrew de Clegley.
Yeah.
I may have missed his name, but he comes from newspapers.
Oh, yes.
And he's been given this new role. And I think he's a bit at sea, quite frankly, but as one would expect. And he's decided to toss a whole lot of, extra balls in the air to see what happens.
Well, I suppose in newspapers, you can understand there being sort of hard news and human interest news and front page news, and you can even throw in crosswords and astrological columns and stuff like that, because the newspaper is supposed to serve many different causes or supply many different demands. This is quite different in people's mind, and to change the perception that we have of television news, or what a news reader should look like, or how it should be presented. I mean, you're really trying to reinvent the wheel, and you're dicing with. There's nothing more important than news, Graham. Isn't that right? I mean, that's the springboard for your entire night.
Well, it is. It is, and news has become, more and more significant particularly in the free-to-air space, because the news on social media.
Yeah.
And so when I was at 7 as news director, I introduced a 4 to 5 hour, 1 hour news. And that wasn't my idea. It came from the East.
Yeah.
And then they've got 11 o'clock news. So they've got now 3 hours.
A lot to fill.
News per day to fill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Graham, can you prophesise, put you on the spot here? I mean, people like Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and many, many others who are now podcasters, in huge ratings, particularly in the United States, they're knocking off the major networks. Is the same phenomena going to occur here in Australia?
Well, look, I think there are different dynamics in our market. I mean, particularly because we're such a market compared to the United States. I mean, we would be less than 1/10 of their population. So they have a huge number of people to select. Their niche groups are in millions, tens or hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
So they do have that advantage. The other thing is I just don't think Australia is as politicised as the United States, and we've certainly seen that written large in the last decade, but few years.
Yes.
Just how politicised every element of American life is. So they're more likely to be those, sort of contentious and controversial podcasts on political issues than there probably would be in Australia, I would think. But, the influence of social media isn't restricted to national borders. It flows internationally. And I think in whatever form it is, has become incredibly popular. And it's partly because, and this is my view, you don't have to do anything. Like you can walk around the house or the street with your put, and it's not active.
No, but there are so many of them. So many of them, it would be very difficult to get a critical mass, but apparently, and as you say, in America, there are so many people to choose from. I noticed the other day, I think it was Friday, it was the anniversary of the death of Walter Cronkite. He died at 94.
Right.
And I don't know for how long he read the news, but it was a long, long time. And you see, he didn't read the news, did he? He told people the news. And if he sat there and told you something, you believed it. Same with Brian Henderson, and I guess the same thing applied in Adelaide with
Rob Kelvin, Kevin Crease.
Kevin Crease, yeah.
Identities.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, those people were seen as highly credible, and of course, their time as the sort of statesman of news was long. It was many decades.
Yes.
And someone like Cronkite would be used when there was a breaking news, like the assassination of John Kennedy, for instance.
Famously, yes.
And people would be riveted to his analysis.
Yeah, you can't buy that, can you? When you settle down in the evening to watch the news, you don't answer the question if you don't watch that you watch.
Well, look, I have to say I switch around a bit, but I'm more drawn to SBS World News simply because I'm interested in things beyond car fires, house fires,
and
YouTube clips, of three-legged dog, licking ice cream.
That's a funny thing, isn't it? The first, 10, 15 minutes of the news is all taken up with crime and ambulance chasing, and I don't know that that's a good thing.
I don't think it is, and in fact, it was one of the things that I felt, I suppose, burdened by while I was there, because I just felt like we weren't, wrestling with the right, and it was partly because, look, filling an hour of news every night's not easy, and 7 nights a week, it's not easy. But nevertheless, I think sometimes the evaluation is based. And look, you can understand this in television, based on pictures, because that's what distinguishes television from the other medium.
Yep.
But there should be some sort of priority in terms of how many people does this affect. In terms of the future of, our security, our economy, the sort of social trends, those sort of things, I think still should be considered to be important news.
And that's where the experience from the news very experienced news director comes in, it's sort of like tasting coffee. You've got to have a knack for knowing what the people not only need to hear but want to hear.
Mm. Well, it is a bit of a mix of those two things. You know, particularly in commercial, let's not, shy away from it. I mean, the number of viewers equals the amount of revenue over a year that you can draw in.
Yep. What do you think? What do you think the future is for news? Do you blue skying it and thinking of what it could be, the direction it's going in?
I think there will probably be dedicated 24-hour news channels.
Mm.
I think, but I don't think the nightly news, certainly on, has a long future.
Interesting.
I'd give it a decade.
And Graham, I tend to agree with you because I see the nightly news as being more theatrical than a news delivery medium. I mean, I look at the sets, I look at the personalities. There's a male and female newsreader like Raglis and Collins. There was a dynamic with the sports crew, like when Treadrow was with them. There was a team effort. It seemed to me to be very theatrical, very glossy, glitzy, entertainment more than actually a delivery.
Well, it's a show.
Figures.
It's a show.
A show, yeah. But should it be a show? Is my comment.
Yeah, I know. Look, I think it's become more of that simply because you have to look at what they're competing with for eyeballs. And, there's been a drift away. I mean, look, everything has changed. I mean, the digital world means you can, broadcast on multi-platforms. You can get it instantaneously. It's refreshable almost, minute by minute. Our lifestyles changed. We don't come home at 5 o'clock at night, have our dinner and sit down in front of the 6 o'clock news.
No.
And that was one of the sort of laws of television. You arrived at, people turned on at 6, you had the same presenters and you went through the same format and that worked. And it did.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was traditional methodology for picking up the news. People had a different time young people have today.
But you made an appointment. You made an appointment to watch 60 Minutes. No, they don't do that anymore.
Or Kelvin and Chris. You didn't want to miss them because they were good. And I talk to young people nowadays, and young people are more portable. And I say that's you don't carry a TV around with you, although you can stream to your mobile device. But young people today, they don't read newsprint. They don't watch TV, formal TV. They actually stream whatever they want. And they pick up their news from social media, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. I can't remember whether it was you or Terry Plain, but someone hired me to do an opinion piece in the 7 News.
It would have been Terry. I think. Yeah. It was sort of that wasn't my area.
We called it Enough is Enough, and it was a sort of a table thumping on some story that was in the news that particular day. I don't know why that finished, but is there room in television news for an opinion piece, an op-ed?
Look, I think particularly given you've got an hour of news, there is somebody aside from the news presenters. They have to remain the sort of objective voice of, the day-to-day happenings.
Well, they should be neutral, Graham, shouldn't they?
They should be.
Yeah.
They should be neutral. But you can, I think you could bring someone in who's well-known, who has a good grasp on, what's happening in the society and takes a position.
Yeah.
And they did actually do that, Graham. I mean, you had Gottliebson had a financial report segment. had a segment. You had Andrew Bolt was on Channel 10 Sunday mornings. And now Sky has taken all that over.
Yeah.
In the way they operate.
Well, certainly all the right-wing stuff. What do you think of Nick Mackenzie's expose of the CFMEU?
Well, sensational piece of journalism. And I mean, I think he's told us what many of us already knew, but
nothing new here.
Prove.
Yeah,
and then those are formidable organisations to take on. I think in that kind of journalism is, we see the basis of what really good journalism should be.
We had him on the program this morning, and do you believe he's got 16 Walkley Awards? That's 16.
And probably one in the making.
This is number 17.
Without a doubt. Yeah. That's amazing. I didn't know that. But you see, one of the things is that in the days gone by, what from your competitors was your ability to break stories.
Yes.
And that is less and less the case these days. For a start, there's less and less competition, so there's not the pressure to actually go out there and find things. The young journalists aren't brought up in a world where investigative journalism is highly valued and probably even taught.
Yeah. And it's expensive too, I would think.
Exactly. It's expensive.
And he did make the comment. He used the five. And I think it's in conjunction with the comment you made earlier about if you look at the Biden debate with Trump, was it really an issue of cognitive abilities, or was it an issue of policy and the real issues that affect the American population?
It's a personality battle rather than a political battle.
And then you as an executive have got to have the chutzpah to withstand it when the Premier rings or the President rings and just get those people off my back.
Exactly. And that happens, and it's happened to me. And there's also, the incredible burden of potential defamation. And I've been involved in numerous, not because we were careless or reckless, but because we went into areas that didn't like us being there.
Yeah.
And because, the defendant, in civil actions like defamation, the defendant is guilty until proven innocent. Yeah. So you either settle with a large sum of money, which shows that you are, prepared to take a backward step, or you fight a case with the possibility of losing and not recovering your costs.
Yes.
And then there's a time factor attached. Looking and considering the Brittany Higgins issue, we're going to probably still be in another 12 months of litigation.
One way or the other.
And fact-finding, more fact-finding than ever before.
Yeah.
Indeed. And look, the judgment falls on the right side, and sometimes it, doesn't. And, these things are highly speculative when you go into a courtroom. I mean, they shouldn't be, but they are.
Graham, I remember Mike McEwen and Des Ryan, his room at 5DN.
Indeed.
And they'd go along with great courage to a Don Dunstan press conference and ask very pointed questions about John Cerruto and why do you have a known heroin dealer working in the Premier's department? Jump up and say, this is grossly improper. And, and poor old Paul Linkson back in 10th Street, he copped it from these people. I mean,
sure did.
Yeah. Oh God. And
he sure did. And Mike and Des blocked from appearing, attending press conferences.
And this was wrong. Unfortunately, it wasn't Paul Linkson. It was the management in Sydney who read the Riot Act by the Premier of South Australia, and then the management at 2GB or Macquarie would ring Paul Linkson and say, "Get pull up."
Yeah.
And he had to do it. And we never should have done that. We should have published and be damned.
Well, that's right. And I think that, those two journos did brilliantly under external and...
Absolutely. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I've been denied access to press conferences as well. So it's not limited to, one premier or one era. It's...
What are you working on at the moment? Anything interesting?
Well, I've just written a book about Derek Bromley, who's the longest-serving Indigenous prisoner in Australian history, in South Australia. He's always maintained his innocence as a murder conviction, and because he maintained his innocence,
It's okay, go on.
Yep, I think that parole was denied him for about 10 years.
Yep.
So hence he served this extraordinary length of time, but he's just been paroled.
Yes.
And he's still under limited conditions. He has to return to the jail every night at 9 o'clock until they nevertheless, he's enjoying, his first taste of freedom for 4 decades.
Well, that's one of
I wrote a book about his life because his life's very interesting and it's representative of, a lot of Indigenous people that were, brought up in circumstances and took the wrong path and ended up,
Yep.
But he's been a bit of a model prisoner, and he's also been a mentor for Indigenous people inside jail. So quite an interesting story. I haven't found a publisher yet. I've sent it off.
What did you call it?
I've called it Enemy of the State because for a long time he was targeted for his resistance in prison.
Yeah.
His involvement in the Royal Commission into Black Deaths in Custody.
Yeah.
Cases that he was involved in, which he won, regarding prison violence against him in particular. So, it's a pretty amazing story, and he's been incredibly strong by his principles for all that time.
Well, it's a good thing that we have got you there to stand up for people when we need to be stood up for, because I'm sure it's a pretty rare thing to have somebody come and fight your case.
Well, it's getting harder and harder. I mean, publisher is because people aren't, I think this is one of the other side effects of the social media, revolution and podcasting and so on. People aren't buying books like they used to.
No, I guess that's a big fact.
Because it's, reading a book is actually, you've got to put time aside and you've got to do a bit of hard thinking yourself.
But there's nothing like it, and I would hate to think that there was an end to this wonderful age of having books.
No, well, look, we want everything quicker.
I guess. Let me know when it comes out. Let me know who the publisher is, and we'll talk again. Graham,
Indeed.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Shall do, you too, and thanks for calling. Thank you for having me on.
All the best. Graham Archer, he is one of the best journalists, one of the greatest journalists, news director, so he was a working journalist, along with being a working executive. I don't think you could find anyone who knows the business better than him.